Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, North Stream, good ready. This is eagleeyes.tech. I am Eagle Falcon. The very last news version of eagleeyes.tech for the year, as next week is our annual prediction show. So, we actually do have quite a bit of very interesting news to talk about. One being a very big bombshell on Apple, which we're going to lead with. And that being the confirming that Apple has, in fact, been slowing down your older iPhones. No, I'm not actually giving in to every single person who doesn't understand technology and just go like, oh yeah, Apple just slows down your iPhone, that way you can get a new one. No, this is actually from Apple. They are actually doing this. You still don't believe me, do you? Because it's absurd. It's an absurd premise on its face that a company like Apple thinks it would get away with putting out software patches to slow down older iPhones. But they actually have been. Apple has admitted they have been doing this, and the reason is the battery. The thing is that just about every single iPhone, and for that fact, every single electronic device nowadays, uses lithium-ion batteries. Alright? Lithium-ion batteries, if you haven't learned yet from this program, are very volatile. The same thing with lithium polymer batteries, or lipo batteries. You know, they can expand, they can combust, they can catch fire if they are exposed in the wrong conditions, which is why tech developers go to extreme lengths, unless you're Samsung and the Note 7, to make sure that these batteries are as safe as possible. Alright, and with the exception of the Note 7 and the very first MacBook Pros, we haven't had very many incidents with lithium-ion or lithium polymer batteries, except for, you know, the occasional foolish fool that takes out a battery and then lights it on fire. But we don't talk about those foolish fools. So, why is Apple slowing down older iPhones? Well, as I said, it has to do with the battery. These older phones, the batteries are deteriorating. And in order to make sure that it's not draining the life of the phone, there are software patches that on older phones is reducing the speed of the processor and therefore draining the battery less. Alright, that makes some sense. The downside, of course, is the fact that your performance drops. And in the case of some older phones, it drops drastically. The other downside is that this also applies to the iPads. Because as any update comes out for the iPhone, it comes out for the iPads and the remaining 20 iPod Touches that are in the world. So although the iPad hasn't been updated in a while, older iPads are getting a slowdown as well. Nobody's talking about that, though. No, the focus is on the iPhone, of course, because that's the biggest selling product in Apple history. So, what do I think about it? I've been in the Android world for an extremely long time. In fact, until earlier this week, I've always been in the Android world. Now I'm in an iPhone. in the Android world, there's always been various little this and that's that have been very, very annoying. Such as if you install the wrong background, your battery can drain a lot. And I've even had some phones where I've had to recharge it 3 times in a day. I mean, try going in the route and having it be mandatory that you have a car charger. Not a good idea, but mandatory. That's the kind of Android phones I've dealt with, which is why I switched to an iPhone to see, is there a better solution in the world? And on one hand, yeah, I can see where Apple's coming from. You want to prolong the battery life as long as possible. On the other hand, you know the only reason Apple came out and admitted this was because benchmarkers found out. That's literally the order this happened, too. Benchmarkers went and found out that their iPhone 6 this year performed a lot worse since last year after a few software updates. And that's what Apple admitted, okay, you got us. We've been throttling down your phone with mandatory software updates. And on that same note, the update I just got on my iPhone has now been badgering me over and 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 over again to set up Apple Pay. I don't want to, but the phone now believes I don't have a choice. It's been badgering me over and over and over again. It's even worse than Windows 10 with Microsoft Edge. And that, my friends, is a rant for another time as well, possibly later in the podcast. I'll see how I feel about it. In fact, actually, let's get on that. Let's get on that whole point right now. You know, I changed my mind. We're gonna talk about the Windows 10 update right now, because that's actually going into this whole bigger picture here that I'm just thinking about. Fluid show here. And this actually goes back to working on a Christmas present for my brother. Now, I'm 90% certain he's not going to hear this until Christmas Day anyway, because this podcast isn't going to air until Christmas Day at noon, in which by that time he'll get his present. But working on that and updating that thing to Windows 10 and getting all the updates. How many pieces of pre-installed cruddy games I've had to uninstall. Between things like Spade Queens or Candy Crush or things like that. Microsoft Edge, every time I'm installing Firefox or Chrome onto the thing, going, you know, I'm faster over here. To which I say, who cares? More and more operating systems are now becoming a platform to push the company's own software. It wasn't all that long ago where Mac and Windows users could both agree that they liked their operating systems because it was just that, an operating system. A foundation for their computer to do what they want and how they want. But more and more and more and more, the operating system is becoming an advertisement platform to go and control the user as to how they should be using their own piece of technology in the way that the operating system developer wants. This is now apparent on macOS with their App Store doing suggestions. Windows 10 in mandatory updates, which granted, if you dig through the settings, you could turn off. Suggested apps in the start menu, which granted, you can turn off. Microsoft Edge telling you should be using it instead of other browsers. And don't get me wrong, I don't hate Microsoft Edge. It's a pretty good browser. I hate the way it tries to make you use it. That gets on my nerves more than anything about it. When I do use it, it's fine. There's a few places where menus are that I don't like, which is why I don't use it. But, I can see how people like it. There's nothing against Edge users. The way it badgers you into using it pisses me off. And people tell me there's a way to turn off that in the settings. I can't find it. Windows 8, Windows 8.1, Windows 7, Windows XP, even Windows Vista. One of the most despised, hated operating systems in computer history. None of them badgered you to this level. And now iOS, one of the biggest mobile platforms there is, granted for a very limited variety of phones, is doing the same thing with its Apple Pay. And then just to put the cherry on top, using its updates that you think are making your phone more and more secure, only to weaken and cripple your device to save on battery cycles? First off, you know what the easiest problem, or the easiest way to solve the degrading battery problem? A user replaceable battery. Yeah. That's the easiest way, but no. That had to go away to be able to make the phone slimmer, sleeker. It is a problem that never needed to exist in the first place. But because Apple, and admittedly, many other manufacturers, so many that if I listed them all, I would consume the entire hour of this podcast naming them all. But I will name Apple because they were the first to do it. Put in unremovable batteries. Batteries that they know decay quicker. But of course, Apple, over and over and over again, every time a new iPhone comes out, keeps making it their key point that our phone has the most users on the newest version. Yeah, well, there might be a reason for that. I do wonder how many people nowadays, even before this whole update scandal broke out, wanted to go back to Windows 7 just because all the badgering 10 did. The only problem is that you have to be on 10 if you want the latest drivers. Kind of a mess, really. And unfortunately, I don't have the answer. The only thing I can say is just be vocal about it, I guess. When Microsoft asks for feedback, say... You know what, just give him a copy to this 15-minute or 16-minute rant now. That might be the biggest way to do it, because this entire thing where operating systems, both Mac, PC, or whatever, being used as advertisement platforms for the company's own products, it's getting really, really obnoxious. And as much as I've made fun of the Linux cultists for being so devoted to Linux and their freedom, I'm starting to really see where they're coming from. And that's even before this battery scandal broke out. So, hooray, now you know! Your buddy's saying that their phone is being updated to go slower. Yeah, they're actually not lying. It's kind of sad now. Hey, let's shift gears very, very drastically. And then let's not talk about how there's massive Apple scandals about intentionally using software to demote your phone. Let's just go straight from first to like 10th gear. Let's just skip a whole bunch of nonsense up to there. And talk about how Intel is kind of subtly talking about getting into the GPU market. So it's no secret right now that Intel has pretty much cornered the CPU market. Granted, that gap has closed quite a bit with the dawn of the AMD Ryzen CPUs. But the Core i X series is no doubt the most powerful CPUs on the market. And even the mainstream Core i7s, i5s, i3s are no slouches either. They are insane workhorses. But AMD right now kind of has the edge with GPUs. I mean, let's be real honest. Intel GPUs are kind of bad. The only thing Intel GPUs have going for them is stability. But performance-wise, please. You might be able to play Bejeweled on an Intel GPU. If you're lucky, maybe it'll run that old Half-Life 2 disc from 10 millennia ago. Uh-oh. I have accidentally turned on my PS4. Whoops. Alright, accidentally turning on PS4s aside. There were rumors in the past as well that AMD and Intel were teamed up to make GPUs. And there's a lot of evidence to support this. I still feel really skeptical about it because that's AMD giving away the one advantage they have in the CPU market. But let's pretend that's true for a minute. Let's pretend that all of this is confirmed, and this also plays into that. That Intel really is going to team up with AMD, and you're going to see Intel CPUs with AMD GPUs on it. Dude, you'd be talking about, like, most Core i5s just being a pretty decent gaming rig on one chip. That's insane. Like, literally insane. But time will tell. Time will definitely tell. Now, we may not see these changes until summer of 2018. In fact, July 2018 is the 50th anniversary of Intel. So if anything, that's probably when we'd see an announcement about major shifts within Intel to focus more on GPUs rather than CPUs. Because, I mean, CPUs, they got that down. They got that down pretty well. Alright, let's get on to talk about an internet outage that happened earlier this week. So, December 18th, there was a lot of talk and a lot of problems on the internet. Alright? There was massive service interruptions across, well, depending on what you're accessing, pretty much globally. And, of course, everyone started going, oh boy. No, net neutrality being repealed, that's causing all these terrible, terrible slowdowns. We were right, all you naysayers were wrong. First off, all these people have no idea what they're talking about. Because all of them said this without any evidence. In fact, you see this a lot with a lot of people like this when they just want their point to be proven right. In fact, what happened was Cogent, which is a company that is responsible for a lot of the networking across the US, along with CenturyLink, had some serious networking issues. And it caused major outages in Washington, New York, Austin, Texas, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Phoenix, some lighter ones in Chicago, Tampa, Florida. Yeah, it didn't matter whether net neutrality existed or not. This was just simply major hardware malfunctions. And Rusa in the chat right now going, oh, they were prepping the fast lanes. But the lack of evidence is proof of the concept. Clearly. No. The evidence points to a hardware failure. It was causing major problems all over the US and a lot of places where a lot of big web servers are stored. And because of that, well, a lot of websites go down. Whoops. It's also why redundancy is a huge factor. You want to make sure that you have duplicate servers in other areas if you're major facilities. However, admittedly, what are you going to do when both San Francisco, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Austin, New York, Washington, Seattle, Chicago, Detroit, that's like where all the major servers are, at least in the US. What can you do? What can you do? Now, well, let's talk about how MSI made a gaming laptop that looks exactly like the Alienware gaming laptops. And granted, that is pretty much the entire story. MSI has made the new GP62 7 Rex Leopard Pro gaming laptop. A gaming laptop that sells for around $1,300, which, for a gaming laptop, not bad. Complete with RGB lights, and, well, if you've ever seen the Alienware 15 or the 17, it looks exactly like that. Complete with going to a steeple top on the top and going to a point on the palm rest. And Rusa in the chat's actually going back to the whole internet outage. The truth, according to Rusa, is it was the second coming of Fight Club, but we can't talk about that. If you have any complaints about me talking about Fight Club, you may email them. My real name is Smitherson, and my address is 123 Fake Street. Have fun hunting me down. Now then, back to MSI copying Alienware blatantly. Like, it's not even funny how it... Now, there are, of course, differences. The Alienware logo is missing. The top doesn't have the lines or the Alienware logo, obviously. And the trackpad doesn't light up like the Alienware ones do. But, you know, excluding that, it's the exact same physical form. And part of me, I'm kind of okay with it. I just find it funny that it's just like, of all the gaming laptops to copy, you copy one of the biggest gaming companies in the world that honestly has not been receiving a whole lot of love lately. I mean, can any of you think of anyone who views Alienware in a positive light right now? Not really, no. But what are you gonna do? Now then, let's shift and talk about the actual parts going into a gaming rig. The EVGA X299 Dark Motherboard. Now, this is your fairly standard high-end motherboard, alright? There's a couple things of note here. First off, it's an X299. This means it can take Core i7Xs and Core i9s. Alright, so it's built for raw power. You got 4 GPU slots on it. There are fans actually on the motherboard to cool the chipsets and the power MOSFETs to help with overclocking. So you don't actually have to rig up your rig to have additional fans trying to cool those components off. That's already taken care of on the motherboard. But the biggest feature about this motherboard, and the reason I have put it on this list, is not because of the fans, not because of the fact that it's a black board with black fans with glossy black plastic pieces over it, making it look like a really cool Batmobile motherboard. It's the fact there are no RGB lights on this motherboard. The RGB light disease this motherboard has somehow, despite all the odds, avoided the RGB disease. It is a Christmas miracle, if I've ever seen one. Huzzah, huzzah. There's finally hope for us all in a world where every keyboard has to light up, like this one right here. You can't see it on the podcast, but I have a keyboard in my hand, and it's turning into a rainbow as I'm hitting the keys. Where everything has to light up in pretty colors. EVGA has avoided it. There might actually be hope for us all. What there isn't any hope for, however, is the topic of the last burb. But before we move on to that, I actually do want to take this time a little bit for a special announcement, which next week I'll have into an actual ad and a mid-roller and whatnot. But we don't have a whole lot of topics to talk about today because it is very close to the holiday season. And the message is actually regarding one of the cons I go to every year, which is Anime Milwaukee here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I've gone there all 10 years it's been around. This will be my 11th year going there. They'll be taking place on February 16th, 17th, and 18th. But special this year, and what this announcement is for, is that I am hosting a panel about starting and getting into Twitch streaming. Right now, my panel is titled "The Basics of Twitch Streaming Careers," and that is at noon on the very first day. I'm actually the very first panel in the entire con. I'm actually pretty excited about being in the convention as a panelist, and I look forward to seeing anyone who can make it this year. That's noon. It'll be in room, I believe it's 101AB, which is like right on the first floor. First panel of the convention before the opening ceremonies even. I'm really excited, and I hope to see people there, and not gonna lie, a little nervous. But very excited for that. And with that out of the way, let's move on to the last burb. And Bruce says he'll place the tracker on me at the con. All right, I just need to frisk myself then while at the convention for electronic spy ninja bugs. But anyway, the last burb story of the year. A couple months ago, I talked about how not only was the SNES Classic coming out, but the Atari Box was also coming out. The Atari Box is a small mini version of the Atari, I want to say 2600, but I'm not entirely sure. It might even have been that there were games from all across the Atari era in this one Raspberry Pi-esque micro console. And it was thought that, hey, this is going to be out on just in time for the holiday season. Well, it is still in pre-order phase. It's not even in pre-order. In fact, with delays, the 14th was supposed to be the day it was to go into actual pre-order. There is still no signs that the Atari Box is even going to come out anytime soon. Supposedly, they're aiming for a spring of 2018 launch date, but I think it's just starting to get to the point where if you're really looking to get access to these old classics, you might have to go back to looking into emulation and hoping that there's still some support that will still work on our modern, overpowered processors. That's going to do it for me today and for the rest of this year. Next week is the prediction show where we talk about the possible predictions, and if I can find it, I will also look back onto the predictions I made last year and see how many of them were correct, and give myself most likely a grade F. Have a very Merry Christmas. Those of you who celebrate Hanukkah, I hope you had a great Hanukkah. For Kwanzaa, hope you all have a happy Kwanzaa. And if there's any holiday I missed, have a happy one of that. Take care. I'll be back next week. Bye-bye. Oh, and a happy Festivus. Because how could I possibly forget the most real holiday of them all? Festivus. Yeah.